We now move on to the second speaker, second talk of this session. Our second speaker today is Dr. Yukti Arora, and it's really a great pleasure for me to introduce one of our former students. She's presently a senior manager, academic communications at Ashoka University. Some of you may know Ashoka University is India's leading liberal arts and science university in Haryana. So prior to that, Dr. Yukti did her PhD in TIFR in material science and has published many high quality research papers. She is also communication officer for Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance. So as a senior manager, her work involves liaising between the research office, business office, and outreach office with a goal to promote teaching and research across all disciplines in Ashoka University. She is also responsible for developing communication strategies and concept notes to build new partnerships and fundraising. So coming from this background, she is the very apt person to tell us about public speaking. So over to you, Yukti.
Thank you so much, Vandana. I think I should be able to do justice to this talk today. Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you. Trust you are all doing well and are taking good care of yourselves in these challenging times. I would also like to extend a big thank you to all the other organizers for having me to this discussion today. It was indeed a pleasure to listen to Professor Sunil before my talk. He has rightly set the stage. And in this talk, essentially, I'll be focusing more on how do you give an impactful oral presentation. Also, I'll try to share some tips and tricks that will come in handy when you go at conferences. How do you network at conferences? Mostly, we are hoping that the conferences or the other events in the near future are going to be in-person events. On that note, I'll quickly jump on we think that researchers really need to present. So you as a PhD student or as a postdoctoral fellow or as a young faculty, even as a senior faculty, you are expected to give presentations at different levels. You are expected to sometimes give a departmental talk where you are being reviewed for your annual performance. You are also expected to deliver plenary lectures, colloquium. You are also expected to give research presentations at various national and international conferences. So when you talk about your research, you talk about the research findings, you end up forming new collaborations, new partnerships. If you're able to do justice to the talk, you're able to effectively communicate your work, you might just start getting insightful questions from the audience, which lead to the development of new research perspectives, something that you wouldn't have thought of before. And in this journey, you keep building your personal as well as institutional profile. Then you are also, while presenting at a conference, you don't realize, but you might have ignited the curiosity of students in your research topic, and they now start, approaching you for various positions as a PhD student, for postdoctoral positions in your lab. You have to hire scientific staff, so you need to explain your science to them, what's the kind of work that you are doing. This is when you have to communicate your work to a scientific community, which is sort of an easy task for us because we are used to understand the kind of jargon that we use during our lab meets. It's a common language for us. The game becomes difficult when you have to really speak to the non-scientific audience. So there are different reasons when you are expected to speak to a non-scientific community. You might have to, participate in public outreach event where you go out and talk to people about your work. The idea is to simply inspire trust in them so that they also, understand the value of your work and they are satisfied knowing the fact that the taxpayers' money is not going in vain. Next up is that you might have to increase the awareness and build the scientific temperament in the society. This is something that we observed since the COVID-19 outbreak, that scientists really came out of the lab. They were engaging with the media, with the health journalists. They were engaging with people on their social media handles, and they were building that scientific temperament to curb the spread of misinformation. Then you are also in the process of inspiring, training the next generation of researchers. You have to raise funds to carry out the work in your lab. So to be able to communicate, so the funder may or may not have the science background, and to be able to really make them understand the impact of your research, you have to use those right kind of words, you have to use the right vocabulary, so that they in the end really end up appreciating the impact of your work and give you more money to carry out your research. So this is a process where you are developing your skills, you are enhancing the research quality and the impact of your research, and this is how your career proceeds. Now, the idea is it is difficult. It is easy for some of us to, come out of that comfort zone and talk about our research. But trust me, it's difficult for most of us. Barrier, overcome this one of the top 10 strong human fears, which is known as glossophobia. This is the fear of speaking in public. So imagine what's worse than giving a presentation. It's giving a presentation on presentation skills. So every word that I'm speaking, every slide that I'm showing, I am being judged. But if I let that pressure build up in my head, I'm certainly not going to do a good job. So one thing that I would request all of you to do today onwards is that keep that thought outside your brain, that what if my presentation doesn't go well? Despite saying that, I will re-emphasize on one thing: consider all your seminars, all your presentations to be very important, because you never know what it is going to bring to you. Maybe an impactful collaboration, maybe you are a funder gets interested in your work, and he or she might just want to invest in your work. So it is not a life or a death kind of a situation. If a presentation goes bad, it just goes bad. You don't have to, really think about it so much. But one thing is for sure, you have to practice. This is the time, the graduation days are it's the best time that you have to really hone these skills, as they can come in handy to recruit staff, to raise money, to do public outreach, to really build collaborations, train students, so on and so forth. So these are the couple of presentation styles that you have to learn to make your life easy. First come is the PowerPoint or the lecture style of a presentation. This is more of a formal classroom mode of a presentation, where you establish a one-way sort of a conversation. So you tell your audience what you're going to tell them, which is that you forecast. Then you actually tell them that you discuss the results and discussions. Then you tell them what you told them, which is that you summarize your findings. So I'll come to the details in a short while. Next up is poster presentation. So in poster presentation, this is more of a semi-formal sort of a presentation mode. Nobody is judging you on your presentation style. So it's a very good opportunity to hone your communication skills. So depending on the kind of visitor that you have, you can pick and choose which story you would want to tell that person. If that person is a PhD colleague, then it's okay. You would want to discuss a specific data where you were struggling to suppress the noise, and you can talk about the experimental details. If the visitor is a potential postdoctoral supervisor, you might just want to emphasize on the key findings of your study. So you pick and choose what exactly you would want to focus upon. Third is the elevator pitch. So this is something that I was not aware of during my early graduation days, but this is something very important. As the name suggests, so this is an informal sort of an introduction of yours that you will use to ignite an important person's interest, either in yourself or in your organization. So it should not go longer than a short elevator ride of 20 to 30 seconds. So if I tell you about my elevator pitch, it would go like, "Hi, my name is Yukti. I work as a senior manager academic communications at Ashoka University. Before joining Ashoka, I was working at India Alliance, and I finished my PhD from TIFR Bombay. I was working on solar batteries. So I've been very closely following your work. It would be great if you could just drop by on my poster, which is poster number 7 at 4 p.m. today." So very smoothly, you have invited an important person to your poster or to your talk. And you will really, trust me, if you go ahead, come out of that comfort zone of yours, go ahead, talk to people at conferences, you will really find that experience enriching. Now, coming back to the presentation, how do you really plan your presentation to go like? You plan to introduce yourself, you would want to give a good outline of the talk, set the stage, give the motivation, why are you really working in this direction? You would want to talk about the different experimental techniques that you have undertaken. Then you talk about the results, you will discuss those results. And in the end, you end up your presentation with an engaging Q&A. But many a times how it generally goes, the previous speaker is running is running late and is eating into your time. There's difficulty sharing your screen, then you forget introducing yourself. You spend so much of time introducing, like setting up the context, that there's hardly any time left to talk about the results. You quickly flip through the results and in the end there is an awkward silence, and then you are like, oh my god, what did I do? Half of my audience is dozed off, half of them are like कि कुछ data समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. Now how do you proceed? How do you circumvent these sort of situation? So this is T-2 days to the most important seminar. Consider all seminars to be very important because, like I mentioned, you never know what it is going to bring back to you. Now, what do you have to really do? You need to strategize, understand the purpose of communication. Are you going to present to raise fund? Are you going to pitch your idea to a funding agency? Are you going to, give a public lecture? Are you going to give a plenary talk at a conference? Are you going to give a departmental talk? Is this the talk in a lab meet? What exactly is the purpose of your communication? Next up is you need to structure your presentation very well. For example, like I was working on solar batteries. So how do you, when I say that you have to develop a compelling story, you need to have a narrative. There is a data. The data would have appeared in some order. Like you would have performed one experiment, usme kuch data important aaya. Then you would be like, yeah, I think to supplement this, I need to do this sort of an experiment. So you will add on that data. So there has to be a story which you need to communicate. For example, if I say that I was working on solar batteries, I'll set the context that there are these lithium ion batteries, lithium is depleting, so I'm not working in that area. There are sodium ion batteries available, but there is then the low melting point of sodium is a concern, so I did not pursue working in that area. So I tried to navigate the periodic table. I chose a metal ion which is earth abundant and can easily store energy. Now that material is a semiconductor and its band gap lies in the visible range. So I tell my audience that, oh my god, that was a yellow colored material and it was able to store so much energy that I thought it can capture energy, it can store energy. Can it be used? Can I fabricate a battery out of it that can be charged simply by putting under sunlight? So this is how you need to develop a story. You need to use as less text as possible on the slides when you are giving a research presentation, and use as many visual aids as possible. Of course, the style is very important. You shouldn't be looking and reading from your slides. You have to establish that eye contact with your audience, show the enthusiasm. You have invested so much of your time in, collecting that data, analyzing data, plotting that data, and beautifying your slides. So it should really reflect in the way you are communicating your work. Now, what generally an audience wants from a talk? Content. So when you talk about content, you have to tell your audience what already exists in the literature. What is it that you are bringing new to the table? What are your contributions to the field? Then of course talk about the new directions or the future directions, because a lot of people working in your domain would be really interested in that last slide. What is this person going to do with this material in the long run? Right. Next up is clarity. Certainly the data has to be well organized on the slides. I do not have time to focus a lot on the bad slides. I would share those slides with Vandana, and I'll request them to share with all of you later. Try to avoid jargon as much as possible, because until and unless it's a lab meet or it's a very subject specific discussion and the audience is able to understand those technical terms, try to avoid using jargon. You will see that you will be able to connect more with your audience in that case. Use clear and simple visual aids. If it's a 20-minute talk, it has to be a 20-minute talk. Maximum, it can be a 22-minute talk. It cannot be 25 or a 30-minute talk. Your audience will be like, "Iska time khatam ho gaya. I really want this talk to end now." So focus a lot on style and delivery. This will only happen if you are practicing your talk. You have to keep your audience awake. You cannot sound monotonous. You have to have voice modulation. If of course I have to stay in one place because this is a virtual stuff. Otherwise, if it's an in-person talk, make sure that you are moving around and interacting. Be friendly and approachable. One very important thing that you have to keep in mind is that you have to inspire trust and confidence in your audience. If you do not know an answer to a question, just be upfront and tell them that, oh my God, this is something that I did not think before. This might just form the future direction of my project. Or you might just say that I'll look into the literature and write back to you. You just cannot give away wrong information only because you don't know an answer to a question, right? So the main goal of your presentation is that you should be able to get your audience to pay attention to what you are saying, make them understand your work, try to use simple English. You certainly at this stage, I would like to highlight one thing. Never ever think of using fancy words. Don't bother, you really need not think about whether your English is fluent or not. What you have to simply focus on is you have to communicate your research finding to a research community or even non-science community. There has to be a clarity in your thought. Use simple plain English words and your job is done, right? There has to be a take-home message at the end of your presentation. So you need to figure out these 5 W's before you prepare your slides. What is the purpose of your presentation? Who your audience is going to be? What part of your project you are going to talk about in this presentation? Whether this is a 5 minutes funding agency type of a talk or it's a plenary talk for 60 minutes. You need to know about the time constraints. Need to know about the space constraints, whether it's in an open air theater or it's in a closed auditorium. So the first 2 minutes of your talk are very, very important. And this is something that I've tried and tested. If you really write down what you are going to say in the first minute, you might not end up saying exactly those words, but that little autopilot mode that you start your presentation with is going to ensure that everything falls into place. Whenever you are reading the title, always paraphrase it. Don't really read each and every word from the slide at the start of your presentation. This is going to really doze off the audience. Always summarize the key findings right away. I'll come to the detail in a short while. So when you have to talk, if it's the first slide, you need not get into the details of the material that you used or the morphology, for example, or the crystallinity. No, you have to give a very motivating example. You have to give a bird eye view, and if possible, if it's more of a applicative type of a research, you have to give the impact, the future impact of your work. So for example, here, if I am working on a material that is photoactive and can store energy, I'll say that I am working towards developing a battery that can be stored by simply putting it under sunlight. So these are the kind of questions that you have to start with so that your audience is connected to what you are saying, and then eventually dive into the data. So give away the conclusions first, make the audience wonder how did it really get there. Try to use a figure. Text only slides for research presentations are quite boring. Now, structuring your presentation, you have to have the intro slides. So these will have to have the bird eye view, like the bigger picture of your research. Then you have to give away the main message. Always have a good outline of the talk. People should know how many projects you are going to talk about, right? This will be the outline of the talk, and then get into the details, talk about the sub points. Then you will have the final slide, which is the conclusion slide. Always have a future direction slide, because that is something that people look forward to, right? So you have to start broad, get specific, and then end broad. So this is like I mentioned. Yes, Vandana.
Can you have a few more minutes?
Okay, I'll wrap up in a couple of minutes now.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, you have to interact sometimes with the scientific audience and then sometimes with the non-scientific audience. So here is my friend. She's talking about liver cell regeneration and the possibility of organ transplant when she is interacting with her departmental colleagues. But when she's giving an outreach talk to school students, very creatively, she has brought in this character of Wolverine who has the superpower to regenerate itself. So these are the kind of analogies that we need to bring in to be able to really make people understand the kind of work that we do. So when I talk about data slides, you need not copy paste images from your paper. Try to use animation, use arrows to focus and emphasize on the findings that you are verbally communicating. Use more of illustrations and less of text. Like if I'll ask most of you, you will say this is not a good slide because this is a very text heavy slide. So if you have to focus on some of the key findings, you need to use bullet points, use bold in moderation to highlight the key findings. So this is how the results, like the result slide should look like. Now, this is again another result slide that is really bad. People will be, your audience will be confused whether to look here or here or here, or whether to focus on this image. Now, for a result slide, you always have to have just one single message. If you have multiple key findings, use different slides and focus on, like I mentioned, use arrows to focus on the findings that you are verbally communicating. Try to use very crisp conclusion bullet points. Try to use more, illustrate your conclusion if possible. Try to use less of text. Now, one should certainly have an acknowledgement slide. You will have to have a thank you slide at the end where you are thanking your supervisor, lab members, etc. But never leave the presentation on the thank you slide, as this slide is going to be up during the Q&A. So try to have the summary of your talk on one last slide and keep that slide open towards the end. So I'll quickly reiterate that you certainly need not have spelling errors in your presentation. Use a consistent template, use key points and full terms if you are using abbreviation. You have to time your presentation. It's 20 minutes for me, so I'll wrap up in another 1 minute. You can take a screen grab if you want of this. Sans serif fonts are always easy to read. Try avoid using serif fonts. If you can try and give a mock presentation to your peers, I think nothing better than that, as that is going to prepare you well for the audience's Q&A. And one last slide, one I'm sure I'm going to take 30 more seconds.
Sure, go ahead, no problem.
Yeah. So since conferences will be an in-person events in the near future, so I will request all of you to not to stick around with your friends at conferences. Try to talk to as many new people as possible. Go introduce yourself, talk about your work. If you are giving an oral presentation at a conference, there are chances that there are parallel sessions going on. And an important person, like a person whom you would want to attend your talk, might just end up attending the other talk. So what you have to do in that case is carry an A4 size copy of your poster, add your CV's QR code there. So you have a lot of information packed in that A4 size poster. Go and during the poster session, like catch that person, have a word with them, troubleshoot your problem, explain your work. And I think that is a successful conference for you at the end. Drop them an email after, not later than a week after the conference. So in this webinars era, try to join maybe 15 minutes prior to the scheduled time, and also try to stay back for an informal discussion with the person of your interest. On that note, I'll end this talk. All the best for your presentations.
Thank you, Yukti, for really a wonderful overview. And I particularly liked your idea of W5. That was really, really nicely put. And I'm sure this will help many of these people. And you covered many aspects of the presentation, what is required. So very key input. So now we can take a few questions. People can raise hand and ask a question, or type a question, whichever. Just waiting for things to come up here. So in the meantime, I will ask a question when we are still waiting for people to come in. So see, I mean, some of these things which you highlighted have, like going from the physical meeting to the webinar, have also changed over the time. So do you want to say something about it? You can even put the answer the question later, because I think there is now one hand there. So, but I just thought that there is an evolution over the time from the in-person plus that plus making the posters now, as you said, adding media has become easier. So maybe something on that you could add a comment later in the section.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Chakravarti, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, madam. So during presentations, like in seminars or in thesis defense or in synopsis, sometimes they are interrupting in the midway, and in that they are either so interested to know this or some queries they are interested. So in that case, what kind of things should be taken care of by the candidates or by the students or by the scholars?
I think at least from my training days, I'm used to being interrupted, giving talks at IISER. You are being interrupted because the people are really curious to understand what you are trying to say. If they have a doubt, they will ask right there and then. So one thing that you have to ensure is that if you have practiced your presentation well, no, your flow will not be hampered. You would know what exactly you have to start from after being interrupted. So it's one thing, one clue is that people are really listening to you, that they are asking those questions. Next is that if you have practiced, it will be very easier for you to jump back, and then you'll be like, yahan se maine choda tha, I'll start from here, and then talk about the key findings. So
actually I'm asking for some of my scholars. They are feeling so furious and they are telling, sir, in the midway, if anyone will disturb us, so then what I will do? I will forget everything else. So actually, and I have told like this, that it is all the audience are interactive with you. This is a very nice factor for this. But how to avoid with the newly beginning scholars when they are beginning with their presentations? So how to avoid with this?
I think the best thing is to request them to give mock presentations. They can form groups within their friend circle. They can, like, this is how we used to do. We used to ask a lot of our seniors to like attend our mock presentations. They used to interrupt us in between, and then we used to develop those story. If you have really developed a narrative, this is how the story is going to flow. If you are being interrupted for 1,000 times, you will know that here my story ended and from here I have to start. So mock presentations really come in handy in these sort of scenarios.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Yeah. So Yukti, there are a couple of questions in the chat box. I think I'll read out. One is very important by Sanjeev Kavi. How to get rid of habits like reiterating same words again and again during presentation?
Okay. So like I mentioned before, if you are able to communicate exactly what you have done, irrespective of how many times you use the same words, it is not going to sound boring. It reads boring, but if I am using same, like I am in the habit of using the word really so much that, but I feel that you wouldn't have found that that repetition of words boring. Now, if like how I used to work around this problem was, I used to write the script for my presentation. When I am writing the script for my presentation, sometimes you can use synonyms of those words, and that is only possible if you have the script right like in front of your eyes and you are practicing reading that script. Initially it takes time, but trust me, over time, like after 3-4 presentations, you will come, like eventually you will be in the habit of using different kinds of word, and your vocabulary will increase eventually.
Okay, there is one more question by Papori. Who to make eye contact with? Should I keep changing it or fix it?
Okay, I will say, if you are starting to give presentations, have your friends sitting across at different places so that they are nodding, they are they can, even if they are not understanding, they can tell you that they are understanding. They can fake it at least for the first couple of presentations. And after a point of time, you will eventually end up looking at each and every person, and you will ensure that if that person is nodding, that means that person is understanding what they are saying. So start with your friends, look at them, and then eventually look at the faculty members, look at the dean, look at the director, and you will be in your comfort zone towards the end of your PhD.
Thank you, Yukti. And I think the main point which she has highlighted is the take-home message is the practice. That's very important. Start the small group student journal clubs, and then you add to it. And actually, I will just say one point to the last one. She said that start with your friends, but later when you give a talk, you would be curious to see how your dean, how your director is responding to it. So you would actually want to look at their face when that comes in. Yeah. And there's also a very nice comment by Nishita Desai in the box that the scientific presentations are like discussion and conversation rather than like a music recital. So it is supposed to be back and forth. So that's good. Yeah.
That's
so
right.
Thank you so much. I think we can go on, but we have to stop with the next panel discussion program.